Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I'm your host as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about math and scheduling. We're going to talk about the personal, the professional, the events, the excitement, and more. Like, I am legitimately excited because I think schedules are awesome if you do them right, right? So when it comes to scheduling, right? At the end of the day, it's coming up with a plan, a process, procedures, etc., with the idea of time being a focal point. Time is inherently mathematical. The passage of time, keeping track of it, and so much more. And so I want to talk about, like I said, the personal, the professional, events, and so many other things because, again, scheduling is inherently mathematical, if not just because of the time aspect, but how you divide things up in what you do, that is also mathematical, and just how your personal schedule may interact with other people's schedules, and just how, I don't know, this oh my god, it's in my head. How different schedules interact, whether it be your own or other people. So I think that's pretty cool, and we're gonna get into it. So if we start on the personal side of things, right? Your personal schedule is going to be dependent on a lot of different factors, and it's going to vary over time to varying degrees of complexity, right? There was a more eloquent way to say that, but my whole point is like there could be a lot, but at the end of the day, it's still mathematical, and there's a way to approach it. And what I think is really cool about scheduling is that, yes, over time, we have developed so many methods to use scheduling in terms of being an organizational tool. But if we hadn't, and well before it, and still currently, scheduling is built into us, right? Like we have a schedule for how we grow. We have a schedule for sleep, when we need to eat, and so many different things, right? Because if we don't measure the time, right, like our body tells us when we need to do these things. And just like looking at the seasons, you can see that things are on a certain schedule, which that's gotten more complicated in recent years. But my point remains, right? Like things have a natural rhythm to them, a natural structure, a natural schedule. And so it exists without us. And I think it's cool because with scheduling as we typically know it, it's like so many other things in this world where they were already going on and we develop further tools to use them. Like we put a name to them. And I think that's pretty cool. And so focusing back onto the schedule, right? Like the schedule, like say if we start off like if you're a kid, and I'm for instance, I'm thinking about the states, um, and how things were for me growing up, like in doing public school. Because I there's gonna be different structures, different places, but like for us, like take the regular school year, right? We had a certain amount of days that we were in school, and in those days, there were certain things that we expected to cover content wise, right? Like different ways that the curriculum's broken up. And then you look at the classes themselves, and those times varied and how they're broken down, right? And it's varied over time, and it's different for different places. But like for instance, you might have the amount of days for school broken down, like I think around 180 in a lot of places. I would have to double check because it's been a minute. I am way older than I look, so it's been a while since I've been in public schools, but like I think it's around 180. But my whole thing is like, so that's spread out throughout the year, right? And oh yeah, I really got to double check that. But like anyway, so that time is spread out over the years, and you have a certain amount of time that you're actually in school, right? So you might have like, let's say 8 hours, right? And now how those classes are structured and how much time depends, right? Because you might have 8 hours a day for like those 5 days, which is like a lot of full-time jobs, just saying. At least over here in the states. And so you might have those 8 hours, and like maybe you have a certain amount of classes, like maybe you have like 7 classes a day, and maybe they broke it down like an hour or hour and 15 minutes and stuff like that. And you might have some breaks in between there, like lunch and all that. But the point is, like, you can break that down, and you're looking at the times, and that corresponds to different events throughout the day. And in those classes, you're expected to learn certain things, and there might be time dedicated to learn those things, but also time to like practice those. And then like when you're dealing with math in particular, I think that gets interesting because not only is there like the inherent schedule of the class, and like, oh well, hey, maybe we're going to cover x amount of topics, and it's going to be like X amount of chapters in this book, and this is what we're going to cover each day. We're expected to have this portion of the class to learn this concept, and this portion of the class to learn that concept, and this portion of the class to practice it all out and ask questions and all that stuff. But the whole point is, like in a class like that, like not only are you dealing with math in the more traditional sense, but you're dealing with all the math that's behind the scenes. And if you're teaching or you're taking the classes, you're doing that, right? Because the teachers, they're planning their things out, and you are too, and going with that schedule. So your schedules are interacting, right? And that can be applied to other classes, and I think that's interesting. And then if you look more, sorry, before I go on, you might have like that structure where you have the same class every day, and you just get like either like classes and some like breaks throughout, or um, you could have like something like 8A and B day classes where you have less classes, but they're longer classes. And again, like the teachers might break things up accordingly. And there's different studies to which one works better and all that stuff, but it realistically is going to work on the student. I don't know. K to 12 is interesting. But anyway, so if we jump to the professional side of things, that's where I think things get interesting, right? Because I'm going to kind of use that to talk about like the professional side of things in general, but also kind of use that to like pivot into events. And again, keeping in mind that like we have all these different ways that these schedules can interact with each other, and just math is being used along the way, and I think that's really cool. So we look on the professional side, like let's take a traditional full-time schedule for like the states, which is like 40 hours a week, with a half an hour lunch thrown um, in each day, and that could be a half hour, and that could be an hour. With the idea of being in a lot of places, you're working 37.5 hours with those breaks, and so that time and how you use it is going to be, dictated by you and your job. And it also gets more interesting, right? Because you're also going to be getting paid a certain amount for that, right? So it's like not only do you have the hours that, sorry, I'm thinking of a way I want to say this. So not only do you have the idea that you have these 40 hours divided up over typically 5 days with breaks, but you also have the work that you're doing throughout that and how you're prioritizing those tasks, but you also have your payment because you got to decide what's worth it for you. And sometimes you have the option to choose something that works really well. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do to survive, and I get it. But you got to make that decision, and there's math in that decision. There's math in how much you get paid. There's math in if you're getting benefits, and if you're getting insurance in said benefits, how that works. And you got to decide what appeals to you, what makes sense mathematically, and how that ties into your current needs and wants. Because like sometimes you got to start off lower to get a little bit higher. Sometimes you can fight for more earlier on still, or fight for more for whatever forever you're at, and you got to take that risk because it's like, what do you do, right? Do you go with the evil or do you try something new? And it's also going to take time to go on interviews, and it also takes money to go on interviews. Um, and so it's like there's math at each and every step, right? Because there's math in the scheduling, sorry, with how your schedule works in general, and if that's worth it to you on a financial level. And then like if you're on like looking for a job, there's math in scheduling interviews and keeping up with those, and also making sure you have enough money and how that's spread out. And then if you're looking for a job while you're working a job, that gets a bit complicated, and you're dealing with your work schedule, but then also scheduling job interviews and figuring that out. And then if you go and you're an event planner, or you deal with event planning on your job, you got to consider things like that too, because you have to devote a certain amount of time to your day to organize this event, right? You got to I think the best thing is to go on with a plan, like learn as much as you need to, about this event and that event, whatever case may be, and then break that down. But it's going to work differently for different people. But the idea is like you have to see how much you'll need of this item and that item, and you'll have to work out delivery times and like payment methods and how much everything is. You'll have to consider budget. It goes on and on and on. And like to give it an example, like if you're throwing a, like say you're at work and you have to have some event, like some sort of party, maybe it's to kick things off for the semester, whatever the case may be. If you're in a position where you're throwing that party and you have to get like food, you have to investigate different businesses. You have to schedule out when you want that food to arrive. You have to, of course, have the schedule for the event itself. And if it's an event that is part of larger events, you have to look at all of that too. So you're looking at a lot of time, like money, and then everything that goes into that event has math in it, whether we realize it or not, right? Because like for like say you're going for a caterer, like you might have your schedule worked out and everything. Then they've got to decide too, right? Because one, you have to be ordering enough for them to justify doing their catering, and different places have different thresholds for that, right? And then they're scheduling everything out with how many orders they have, how long it takes to make this dish, that dish, get this ingredient, that ingredient, and putting it all together and getting it all out to you. And there's a lot of coordination, like back and forth. And you can go on and on and on with that. And then if you are someone who works and goes to school, which is the reality for a lot of people that are like fresh college students or returning students, then you have to consider your work schedule, in your personal schedule, in your school schedule, and then if you have kids, that too. And my point in though is that schedules can be very, very helpful. And no matter how you cut it, there's a lot of math in it. And whether you realize it or not, you're interacting with a lot of different schedules, doing a lot of different math, whether you're writing it down or not. And I recommend writing it down if you can, right? If it makes sense. But yeah, then it's just like there's so many tools involved for scheduling, right? Whether we do it on our computer, on our phone, or in a physical planner, whatever the case is, there's a lot of math behind the scenes with all that too. To like how much space is used, to the shape of whatever you're taking the schedule on, to making everything work if you're programming something, to you like physically writing things out. No matter how you cut it, there's a lot of math involved, just like across the board. And you can play this game with just about anything. And again, like whether you write it down or not, you can schedule something, right? And again, I recommend writing it down. But it's a big part of our lives. And if we had never come up with a lot of the scheduling tools that we have, we'd still have our everyday schedules. And we would still work with other people. And I think that's interesting, right? I think that's pretty cool. And just like, God, there's so much more you can talk about, right? Because like if you're playing music, then you got to schedule practice, or like really with a lot of other things that you might be interested in, you got to schedule that time into your every day. But yeah, and right now, like I tend to like go back and forth with the times that I schedule for my videos. Like there's been times in the past where like I've scheduled things out in terms of like, oh well, I want this video to come out on this date and I want to like take this time to do that. And there are other times where it's like more loose, where there's still a schedule where it's like I gotta do this when I'm home between X hour and Y hour. And so it might not be exact, but I still have an idea of that schedule. And I still have an idea of the videos that I want to make during the time that I'm recording. And to make it worth my while, I tend to record more videos at once. And sometimes I spread those out. And sometimes I post as soon as I can. Um, and it depends on how I feel and if I think it's going to like help one way or the other. But I do have to think about those things. And so yeah, it's just scheduling is just it's everywhere. And I think that's cool, and it involves a lot of math, whether we're talking about the inherent time aspect, the money aspect, or like everything and anything in between. That being said, I'll see you in the next. I was gonna say movie, but I mean video. I don't know. It's getting late. Professor Prime out.